Good morning, everyone. This is our March network-wide meeting, and we are gonna. Was someone trying to say something? So we are going to go into what we're going to discuss today. So some of the items that we plan to discuss are some key program updates. We'll have our second state plan meeting. We'll go over spending production updates, our next meeting when that is scheduled, as well as some WDR program updates. At the beginning, of course, we'll start with the Weatherization Assistance Program. So for some key program updates, all references to the bipartisan infrastructure law, or what we've called bill, should now reference the legal name of the, I'm sorry, I actually slipped out, of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, or IJA, or IIJA. DHCD did meet with DOE on Monday, the 17th, and we are back to normal communication activities. We're told that the IJA and bill funding is processing, but there are some payments that are lagging, and they did request some adjustments to our submissions. So we promptly made those adjustments and we've resubmitted. For the grant agreements for IJA, or what we used to call bill, those are going to expire at the end of this month, so March 31st. And 1-year amendments are being prepared. The network falls into 2 categories. The first category is going to be that your production is adequate, your spending is, and you could take on potential reallocated funds in that next 1-year amendment. Or the category 2 would be that production is lagging and we'll be reallocating some of our IJA funds. Emails were issued yesterday afternoon. So if you received one of those emails, we've requested that you respond back by the end of this week, which would be the 21st. For the remainder of the WRF jobs, they're going to need to result in a DOE or IJA/bill funded weatherization home. When we did speak with DOE, we did have some clarity on some possibility to go a little bit longer with the IJA completions. So for any of the WRF jobs that are going to be associated with the DOE completion, please submit those for your readiness and your annual formula funded invoices by May 6th. That way it would result in the completion on time for you to close out the grant. For the readiness jobs that would result in an IJA or bill completion, we would ask for you to have the readiness portion completed by Friday, June 6th. That's currently the program year 24 final invoice deadline. We were told that the IJA bill invoice could lag some. And then for the 2025 interchange, this has been moved from June to the week of August 18th. The training center requested an additional time for planning, and more information will follow on that. Now it looks like Leroy, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, yes, good morning.
Good morning.
This WRF jobs, we have one that we have put in the system for the 2024 funding. Are you saying that we have to complete that WRF and submit that invoice by the end of May? Is that correct?
So originally for readiness, we had provided guidance that to have the job completed in time within this DOE 3-year grant cycle that we're in. Currently, we're in that final year. So our guidance before was that it would make the most sense to have your readiness invoiced in March, and then to have your DOE completed. But we do realize that there are jobs that sometimes they're done concurrently, they're done at the same time. But with the guidance we've provided now, you could probably go through the end of May and then result in the DOE completion in time, but you would have to individually look at that job to see what's being done and if that time frame works for you. But that would be the time frame we would be looking at. We did have discussions with DOE about our readiness balance, and we realized we're going to probably have to return funds. We never want to return funds. And normally, at least in the time I've been here, we have not. But it does look likely that we will be. And right now, it appeared to be a pretty substantial amount in the readiness funds. So we want to minimize the amount that we're returning as best as we can. So we're trying to provide the flexibility with you, but you need to be mindful if it's going to result in a DOE completion, that you can have those both completed and meet the deadlines that are going to be in grant agreements or amendments. And if it's an IJA completion, so you've done the readiness, then you have IJA, your readiness invoice could be June 6th. You could have it a little bit later. Does that help clarify?
In a sense, but it's attached to weatherization, so I just want to make sure that I understand that the WRF and the weatherization for this particular job has to be done by May the 6th.
So I think the wording was a little off on that one point. The readiness we're asking by May 6th for the readiness. The DOE, if it's a DOE 24 job, your grant agreement says June 6th. So you can go to June 6th with DOE. So I am sorry for the wording on that, and I'm glad you asked that question. But yes, the DOE portion, you would follow your current grant agreement or amendment that you have in place.
Okay, thank you.
And Stephen, it looks like you have a question as well.
Yes. So it's what you've just been talking about, but so May the 6th, the WRF portion has to be done, and then the weatherization portion has to be done by June 6th. Is that what you're saying? Or
That's
is
correct.
both of them? Okay.
The guidance we'd provide right now is you need to have your readiness job completed by May 6th to ensure that you have the DOE invoice in on time. You can speak with us if there's situations where maybe it's being done at the same time and you could meet that June 6th deadline with DOE. But just to be mindful of it, it has to result in a DOE completion, which Tim's saying is a completion is an invoice. We need to have those done a little bit earlier for the most part, with and making sure that it can go through the approval process, that it's a job that does qualify for readiness funds, because we do report all the information to DOE. They ask for on a yearly basis all of the information for the readiness jobs. Okay, and then I'm gonna go over to Jen.
Hi, Michelle. There was a question in the chat from Sandra about will there be a finance component at the August interchange? Sandra, I'm not sure that we have anything worked out on that, and we'll let Tim speak to that towards the end if we could, to address some of those interchange questions. Anyway, I'm going to talk. This starts the second network meeting of our state plan process. I sent everybody an email yesterday. I know that you may not have a chance to review some of the updates. Michelle, can we go to the next slide? Thank you. But it's a very draft. The budget is still a little off. We're $2 short on one category. I'm a penny off in travel, and it won't let me justify it without being 0 cents off. And so we're fiddling it. But the subgrantee portion, that's you guys, is pretty well set. And I do not anticipate there being really any major changes to that budget section. So that budget part I sent you yesterday, when it comes to the annual file and the budget, should be pretty accurate. So I wanted to go over just a few of the things that I think are the most important changes, and to talk about upcoming meetings. So if we go to the next slide, that'd be helpful. So the first thing is that we did incorporate those new budget categories: the energy audit, the client intake eligibility, and the final inspection. And what I ended up doing is I gave you what you asked for. So whatever you put in your budget and your GMP, that is what I ended up submitting as a part of the budget categories for those new ones. What this did is it pretty significantly reduced our program operations, and it did lower ACPU. Calculation in page, but because our production operations has been reduced so much significantly compared to last year, because we did pull those categories out, you'll also notice your production goals are lower. I mean, some of you may have had, if you had 10 last year, you might have 5 this year. That's how significantly these budget categories pulled out of program ops. And so I do just want to remind, this is like an experiment, right? We're all sort of guessing and trying to do our best to decide what we're going to need for these budget categories. So these are convertible. So if you decide later in through the grant that you didn't need that much or you need more, we can convert energy audit back into program ops and vice versa. However, your production goals will change. So I just want to emphasize that. So if we do end up moving, say, client intake, some of that money back into program ops, we'll have to recalculate what your unit goal is going to be, because it has to be program ops divided by the ACPU. So if program ops increases, we still divide by that flat number, the production will go up. I just want to make sure people understand that, so that we don't have questions down the line. If you're like, well, I already did my 4 units or my 8 units or my 27 units, why do I have to do more? It's because when we move things back into program operations, we have to recalculate the unit goal. Okay, so next slide, please. This shows those budget categories in page. So I just wanted to draw your attention. You probably see something new than the subgrantee TNTA that you haven't seen before, and I'm going to get to that, I promise. But look at the energy audits, the client intake and final inspection. This is how much the network requested in each of their grant management plans and their budget categories for each of those categories. So you can see it was a big chunk, close to $1 million got pulled out of program ops. Next slide, please.
Are we supposed to be seeing these slides, or are you all just looking at them?
You can't see them, Stephen?
I can't, but I may have messed something up. I know that's
can anybody else not see them? You can see them. Okay, thank you.
I can see them.
Okay, thanks. Uh-oh, Stephen. We'll send them. Thank you. We'll send them out, Stephen, but the slide I just showed is a direct clip from the annual plan the budget that I sent you yesterday in that email. So if you can see, the budget is the same thing. I just clipped it and put it in a slide. I do want to talk about a new policy, and you'll see is the subgrantee TNTA for contractor training stipends. We know that there's been a hard time getting contractors for weatherization, and we want to try to help relieve some of that pressure and assist in ways we can. So we came up with an idea to take $50,000 out of grantee TNTA and put it into subgrantee TNTA. This will be allocated to you. It is allocated to you based on the percentage of the allocation you get. So if you get 10% of the allocation, you get 10% of $50,000. Does that make sense? So everybody gets their little piece of the pot. The way we're doing this, and this is permissible through DOE, and I did speak to my project officer about this on Monday when we met with them and told them we intended to do this, is we can provide stipends for travel and meals not provided by us, but if they need to go out or whatever, just we can provide that as a stipend to contractors for the purposes of getting trained. So if we're like going to the training center or going to the interchange, for example, if we wanted to try to bring some contractors in, we are allowing subgrantees to award up to $250 per day per individual, but it's not to exceed the GSA rate. So if the GSA rate in Salem, Virginia is $150, you can give up to $150, not $250. If in Arlington is $277, well, you can still only give $250. You guys tracking with me? By the way, this would cover Virginia Beach, the $250.
Hey, Jen,
Yeah,
is that GSA rate for lodging and meals?
yes.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Subgrantees are responsible for submitting the invoices for the subcontractor training. So we're awarding it to you and you will invoice us for those travel stipends. And then you are also responsible for retaining the stipend receiving subcontractors for weatherization services. We'd like you to keep them for a year after training is provided. So you would need to work out an agreement between you and the trainer, the contractor you're training, so that they would be a contractor for you for a year after receiving the stipend for training. This is new. So, please let me know if you have questions or comments. I can give you a few more seconds to kind of digest this. But this is, like I said, this is brand new. So I wanted to make sure that you all have a chance to look at this. So this will be awarded in your grant agreements. You've not had subgrantee TNTA from DOE before. This is new, but this is specifically for training contractors. Anybody have any thoughts or feedback they want to give me? You like it? You hate it?
Hey, Jen, this is
Yeah.
Brian. So would this mean like if you don't retain them for that year, they would just pay back the amount that they utilized in the training stipends? Is that what that
Yeah.
language kind of means at the bottom? Okay.
I think that would be, preferable. I'm not sure if we came up with that scenario yet, Tim. I don't know if you have any feedback on that, but yeah, if they don't want to work for you, then yeah, they probably shouldn't keep that money that you gave them.
Yeah, that's the preliminary thought is the subgrant the contractor would be responsible for reimbursing the subgrantee. So.
Gotcha. I just am thinking through like the contractor procurement. It's just added language in the new contracts that would have to go out. So I just want to make sure that we were clear on what the teeth for that might be. Thanks.
Yeah. Anybody else have any feedback? Again, do we think this will help? I'm not sure.
Yeah, we're looking for feedback and ideas.
I think this will help quite a bit.
Thanks, Chase.
Do you have any expectations as far as who specifically attends? For example, and how many from an individual contractor?
No, it's gonna be based on your funding amount, right? So everybody's gonna get an X amount of pot of this $50,000. This is an experiment. So however much money you have is how many people you can send. But like I said, the GSA rates vary. So if you have one training, and the GSA rate may be like 125 per person, you might be able to send more people than if the GSA rate is like 240, so that's for each agency to determine how many folks they can sponsor through this proposal.
Right. I'm sorry. I thought what I meant was like per training, no more than 3 people per training or.
No, we don't have those kind of limitations.
Okay.
This is
And
really
this
up to you guys to determine, if you think you got a contractor, but they won't get trained because of XYZ. This is to help close that gap, that financial gap.
And pretty much any of the training or specifically WX training. I mean, that's pretty much what they do anyway, but
Yes, to be a weatherization contractor for you. So,
Right.
So any of the approved weatherization classes that would get them the certifications they need, to be able to work for you as a contractor.
doing weatherization.
Doing weatherization. Yeah, I can't train them to, I don't know, to be your secretary. Any other thoughts or feedbacks before we move on? All right, well, you can email me if you have any other questions or thoughts. I do hope that this will help with the getting contractors trained and recruiting more contractors. And again, if this is successful, then it's something that we could continue in our next year's state plan and perhaps increase it. So just wanted to let you know this is something new that we are trying to work on with you for you guys to get more contractors in the door for you. All right, I think next slide, Michelle. This is also a new policy. This is advance pay policy. It is allowable for WAP. We did get clarification from our state officers that are project officers that this is something that we can put. It's going into our new operations manual, which y'all should see shortly. We're getting closer and closer to it. And the idea for this is that for some of those overhead costs at the beginning of a grant, or really anytime between a grant, that we want to be able to advance you some of the DOE formula funding early on to cover those costs. So the way it works is that we will advance up to 15% of the grant period allocation for the first 2 months of the budget period. So July and August, essentially. To receive the payments, there's a couple conditions that an agency must meet before being eligible. One of them is that each agency needs to demonstrate that they've met their quarterly production goals. Quarterly production goals is also something that's new. We give you yearly goals, but DOE is looking at it on a quarterly basis. And so in your contract this year, we're going to take your yearly goal and split it into quarters. So, like if let's just say you have 4 units you have to create. That means 1 per quarter, right? So your quarterly goal will be 1. So we have to look at your previous quarter and see that if you met your production goals. If you did not meet your production goals for that quarter, then you will not be eligible for the advance at that time. And that means invoicing. A production, a unit completion is a completion in Hancock. So that means it's been invoiced and it's all done. Flow over to, LIHEAP we already advanced. I don't know, Tim, if you want to answer Mark's question about whether this will flow over to LIHEAP and IJA.
Well, with LIHEAP we don't advance, but it's possible with IJA. Yeah, I mean, I think it's also possible. We need to. It's going to be in our operations manual, and we do have to update our IJA plan at some point with some of these references to the operations manual. But yeah, I mean, we're trying this. We want to get the language right. And I want to emphasize, I'm also working with, I've had discussions with our internal finance folks. I'm meeting with them today to talk about this. I think this should satisfy them. But let's get some feedback from the network at the same time. So we're certainly open to that. And that is the intent, to have like one advance pay policy for all funding.
I'm sorry, I meant, so we get an advance from LIHEAP from HHS at the beginning of the year to try to make sure that your payments aren't late. That's what I meant. So we get it from DSS. We get like a chunk in the beginning so that when you guys are starting off the beginning of the LIHEAP, there's no delay in getting those invoices paid, because I know that was a problem in the past. So if we don't meet our production goals while through the advance, you will have to return the funding. And one of the things that you need to do for this is you need to establish an interest-bearing bank account exclusively for the purpose of managing the advance payments, and that any interest earned in the program income will be put right back into weatherization. No interest can be capped. All program income has to go right back into the program. And we cannot advance within 90 days of the end of the grant period. That just because that's when we're reallocating, quite frankly, when we're trying to see when funds need to be spent and if funds need to move. So we're not going to be able to advance then. This is new. This is straight out of our program, our operations manual. So you see, like, as for example, the C chapter below, that's my fault. I should have cut that out. But this will be a part of our new operations manual. So we are hoping that this will help alleviate some of the pressure when you guys are doing your planning for beginning off a grant cycle. Does anybody else have any more feedback or questions about this? And we're still working through it too. I mean, we're trying to do the best we can on this policy.
Can it only be done at the beginning of the grant cycle?
No, it can be done at any point through the grant cycle, but less that last 90 days, which is basically the last quarter. So think of it, Q1, 2, and 3 would be, and you could be able to do in advance, but not Q4, not at the end of a grant period.
Could there possibly be special circumstances such as weather if you ask for this advance aid in March and you hadn't met your goals for the prior quarter because of a hurricane or weather or something like that? Would things like that be taken into consideration?
I mean, I probably, but
I
that would
think
be on
we
a
could
case
take-
by case, I think,
Yeah.
Tim.
And that,
Yeah,
that's
I
where I
think we
can
could
see
take
that
that
you
into
need it.
consideration. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah.
I mean, we know
Mark
that,
had
I
a
mean, if there's
question.
external,
Mark had a question. Is this the 1 year of the 3-year grant cycle? It's going to be all, not the grant cycle. It's going to be for individual grant agreements.
yeah, the grant period, which is 1 year. So July 1 to June 30 each year. So we are beginning a new grant cycle on July 1st, 2025. But it's a 3-year grant cycle, but each grant cycle has 3 periods within it, 3 allocations. So so for each grant period. Any other thoughts or questions, feedback?
Before we move on, this has nothing to do with that, but earlier when you was talking about how we was breaking out DOE and, naturally we're going to have less program ops, but you said lower ACPUs as well. So,
yeah.
but you didn't mean the money value coming down in ACPU, right?
No. What I mean is that we've had a problem lately with our ACPUs being elevated, and that all comes out of program operations, including the energy audits, the QCI intake, right? By busting that out, by you guys telling me how much you wanted, and we took that out of program operations, that should relieve the burden of you guys trying to meet that ACPU. It's $8,547 for next year. And so that's what I meant, but it's not lowering the value. No, we're not saying now your ACPU is $6,000. We're not, it's the same. And it's been raised from last year. But your production goals may be lower because we took so much out of program operations. Because all the unit goal for you, all it is your program operations divided by that ACPU, and it tells us how many units you should create, right? If you decide to move money, like maybe you put a lot of money in audit and then turned out you didn't need to spend that much, and you rather move it into program operations, we can still do that like we do with other budget categories. We can move that funding into program operations, but that will increase your unit production numbers. So I just want people to keep that in mind, that, if you want to move funds back over, you're going to have to produce more units. And that's just to be in compliance with the program, with the feds. Like, we can't have an elevated ACPU for grant closure, for example. It would be very bad. Anybody else have any other questions on either of those things before we move on? Okay, I think we can go to the next slide. And again, you guys can always email me. This is hard to read and you don't need to read it, but right now, this is also going in our new operations manual. One of the things that we have to have new this year for the state plan is we had to create and we have to submit a complaints and dispute resolution policy. We basically copied and pasted our agency's complaints and dispute policy, DHCDs, from various programs, and then curtailed it to meet weatherization. But this will be submitted as part of the state plan this year. And so I believe that all of you guys have your own dispute and resolution policies, which is a part of we have to stay that you guys have it. If anyone doesn't have a complaints and dispute resolution policy, I encourage you to get one. Maybe that's something WAG members can ask around, ask the WAG leadership for examples of complaints and dispute policy, because you guys are going to be required to have one. And this is basically how we, like the state level, like what we do about complaints and disputes. Thank you, Alicia. That is helpful, adding it to the WAG. Does anybody not have one and have concerns or anything? This is really not going to, it's just, we have to have a policy. So we're putting one together and putting it in our operations manual. I also have to attach this as a special attachment to the state plan for this year. So I wanted to make you aware of it. Anybody have anything they want to say about it? Do you like your complaints and dispute policy resolution policy? This is the boring stuff of weatherization nobody wants to talk about. Okay.
This
And
is
then
Hey, Jen, go back for a second. What is DHCD's responsibility with approving the subgrantee's dispute resolution process? Like, what is that like?
I don't have to approve it. You just have to have one. And it will be in Jennifer McCoy's checklist for fiscal monitoring. So you just have to have one.
Just include our policy in that review
Yeah.
process. Okay. Gotcha.
Correct. Yeah. I'm not
Thanks.
telling you what needs to be in it. But you know, it should be professional. It shouldn't be, we tell clients that don't like things to, you know, hit the road. You know, we want it to be a professional document in how you handle your client disputes, but I'm not going to tell you what specific things have to be in it, but you do have to have one.
Brian, I can send you a copy of the two that I have if you need reference.
So
I
Jen,
got you.
is this more than just this is in addition to the denial or policy that we all had to have? I'm just.
I mean, we maybe, this may be semantics. We may be talking about the same thing. If you have a policy for how you deny a client, or if you have to terminate services, and then if you, as long as you have something in there about appeals process for clients, you know, so that they can, you know, if they are unsatisfied, they can, you know, what their process is for
Right.
dealing with you. We may just be talking about semantics. So you may call it your termination policy or your client denial policy. A DOE calls it a complaint and dispute resolution policy.
Okay,
So that's the terminology we're using.
Well, I'm just trying to make sure if I need to change this, I can change the heading to stay in compliance with DOE, because I don't want Miss McCoy to smack me on the hands or anything like that.
Well, you can send it to us and Jen and I can look at it.
That'd be fine. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Or again, you can also lean on your WAG members. You know, I think Alicia might be a good resource here. She's been adding some stuff in the chat that is very helpful about the terminology. So, you know, I think definitely lean on your WAG members as well for the policy. Yeah. Anything else before? I think I only have one more slide. So, okay, next slide, please. These are just upcoming meetings and PAC members. There are 2 of you in this meeting. This is news to you. I meant to get an email out yesterday, didn't. So I'll send this to you soon. But we have some tentative upcoming meetings. For our state plan process, we must have at least one network meeting, a policy advisor council or PAC meeting, and a public hearing. We are trying to submit this thing early this year because, you know, there was that weird period in January and February. And so the DOE grant officers are very backed up. And they're the ones who make the final approval of state plans. So they were unable to start reviewing the April 1 deadline. There's April 1 states that start on April 1st. They were due in February. And so they are really backed up and there's not a lot of them. And so they're just really overwhelmed. So we're trying to get it in early in order to try to get approval as quickly as possible so we can get our funding as close to July 1 as possible. So that's why these are basically like a month early. So the PAC meeting, we are tentatively looking at Thursday, April 3rd at 10 a.m. The network is represented by two two people who are on this call, Chase for AECP and Eric with ACAP. But we also have other members from other agencies, Energy, Dominion, all of our utilities are on there that comprise the PAC. But your interests are represented well in both Chase and Eric. And then we will have our public hearing on Tuesday, April 8th at 10 a.m. And everyone is invited to this public hearing. It is recorded. I do want to clarify the public hearing is not like this format, is not a question and answer period. It is basically Tim will read a statement about our state plan and then we can accept comments. And so if you want to say, I think this plan is stupid, we will record that as a plan. Or if you want to say, we think this plan is great, we can record that as a comment. But if you have a specific question, like I see on page 67, that blah, blah, blah says this, we will not be answering that question. We will say, thank you for your comment. So I just want to make sure that you guys understand that that's the format for that meeting. The PAC meeting is more like this. They get the draft ahead of time. They come with questions. We discuss the changes. They tell us what they think. If something should be changed, we look at it in that kind of a format. Brian, they have not met yet. No, the first meeting is going to be on, the only meeting will be on the 3rd. Anybody have any other questions about this? And Eric put something in the chat. You read it. VACAP members, please feel free to share your thoughts before we head into the PAC meeting, and he included his email. I do encourage you to reach out to Eric and Chase about, I did send you all the pertinent sections. I didn't include the SF 424, which is basically just the front application part where we check boxes and say we're allowed to do weatherization and here's the dates and, who our folks are. I didn't include that section, but I did include the budget, the annual file, and the master file for you. Master file, I don't see many of those really changing, so for some tweaks in the budget. But if you do encourage you to look at it, and if you have questions or concerns, to send them to Chase and Eric so that we can address them during the PAC meeting. And again, you are well represented by both of these individuals. They really have your best interest and concerns at heart. And so I would suggest leaning into them. And Chase put his email address in the chat as well for folks to be able to get in touch with him. And then, of course, you can always email me with your questions and concerns if you've had a chance to review the documents. I will do my best to try to answer them. Please know some things are statutory and I can't change. And, if it's something that only one agency has a problem with, we're unlikely to change it. So keep that in mind as well. So for these policies, but not a lot has changed, but I did want to make sure that we highlighted the ones that did change because they are new and make sure you guys have an understanding of it. So again, if anybody has any questions, please let me know. Oh, and then the last thing I'm going to say is there is some changes to the health and safety plan, and I think David is up next to talk about them.
Yeah, I can speak to the health and safety changes real quick. So over the last year or so, ever since we got WRF and WDR funds, there's been a lot of discussion of what is a deferral and what is not a deferral. That discussions have been kind of going around the house quite frequently. So we heard the network and we heard from several sub-grantees that they would like to have more of cost caps or more definitive a line in the sand there. So in the health and safety section, we did include some cost caps of for certain measures, not every measure. In the 22-7, the WPN that DOE released, there is some specific language in there where we as the grantee had to define what is limited repairs, what is major repairs, and minor repairs. So I encourage you all to read that section and to pay attention to the cost caps and some of the changes in the health and safety section specifically. And as Jennifer mentioned, right now it's still in draft phase. Please feel free to reach out and discuss any of those items before it actually becomes finalized.
did we have any questions? Or if not, then I can move on to our spending update.
What was that WPN, David? What was that WPN you mentioned?
It was 22-7, the table of issues specifically. But if you don't want to, right now, it's hard to find any kind of documentation on DOE's website.
Yeah, we know.
So pretty much if you, we sent out a copy of our draft state plan yesterday. If you read that, it's almost word for word what DOE's table of issue is, with the exception of when DOE punted it to us as subgrantees to make definitions of what is major, what is minor, what is limited repairs. We did go in and add some definitions there on that.
We also added price caps. So the idea is for you guys to look at that and see if those price caps are reasonable, unreasonable. Do they need to be more or less? Give us your feedback on those price caps to help keep you in line with what 22-7 means. Or 24/7, whatever that is. I don't know.
I have a quick question or two things. Appreciate the email that got sent out with the attachments. When you're getting to that, because I was reviewing the health and safety, there's a large portion that's cut off, so you can't really see the whole thing, just FYI, in what was sent out. So it was kind of hard to see everything there. So, and also I'm going to put it in the chat, but I found on NASCASP where you can access all the WPNs. And so I'm going to put it in the chat just in case anybody else wants to be able to access them. Something came up earlier this morning. I was like, oh, exciting. So, and then just thank you all for the changes. I think the changes that were made when it comes to the, breaking out auditing and things like that is going to be extremely helpful for our average cost. So just thank you for that.
Thanks for putting that link in the chat, Megan. That's going to be really helpful. And it's the same link that we use because that's the only place you can find them right now.
Additionally to finding some of the, if you saved hyperlinks like in emails or something to WPNs on DOE's website, those hyperlinks still work. It's just hidden from their website directly. I just used one this morning. So it is a helpful thing if you happen to have those hyperlinks saved somewhere. I just got lucky and found one in my email. Any more questions?
You had a question?
Bill, I see your hand up.
Yeah, David, during the DHCD CHP call last week, we talked about the idea of DHCD or the possibility of DHCD submitting a variance to DOE regarding the 6-inch SWS requirement for outdoor units. And my recollection was that you were open to the idea and just wanted to try to find or locate the variance. Megan was able to locate that for me, both the spreadsheet version and the WPN version. Is this something that needs to be done as part of the state plan process, or is that something that would stand on its own? What can we do to help with that?
Yeah, variances can be requested at any time. They do have to follow, there's a specific procedure, and it could take DOE a little bit to approve it. I'm not sure on the exact timeline, but once it's submitted, and once we have the discussion with you all, we might have clarifying questions for you. There's specific things that they ask for, like where's the policy, where's the SWS reference, why can you not comply with it, and then what the solution is. They kind of want a beginning to end story there when we request those variances. So anytime that you cannot, and this goes for any subgrantee, anytime that you are not able to install a measure according to the SWS to a specific, to the specifics of the SWS, we can submit a variance and get a variance for those alterations or installations that we are not able to meet the SWS to the letter. Again, those have to go through DOE and they get reviewed and approved by DOE, and it can happen at any time, but you cannot proceed with that until we get those approved variances back from them.
Okay, right, great.
Yeah,
Thanks.
just adding on to David's comment. I mean, an unsuccessful argument is, our code is this. We already have code, right? It has to be a reason why we cannot meet the SWS for some technical condition or something that's specific to, the Commonwealth here.
Yeah, and I got to pull them. We only have a great example, not to take up too much time here, but a great example is like attic hatches. Per the SWS, we have to insulate our attic hatch to the minimum of what's around it. So if you're insulating your attic to R40, your attic hatch has to be to R40. But if it's over in the eaves of the house where you can't physically raise it up, we are allowed to reduce that R value of that attic hatch to a reasonable level where you can access it. So that's one variance that we do have in there. We only have like 4 maybe, but we have to come up with a reason why you can't do it to those specific standards.
Okay, great, thanks.
Thank you, David. So I'm going to go through this fairly quickly. It's fairly similar to where we were last month. And if you have questions, you can always feel free to reach out to me as well. I'll go through the ACPU levels, our spending and balances, the production count, and our health and safety percentages. And these numbers are going to be through approved invoices of last Friday of March 14th. So for our ACPU levels, you can see right now for the DOE and the readiness program years, we are within our limitations. That can change depending on final invoices that are submitted. So we do need to be mindful of those final invoices or the funds that are remaining because it can jump up. But right now we are within those allowable limits. For LIHEAP, we are at the most elevated number. We do want to work on bringing that down, but we do have the exception in our agreement, our LIHEAP state plan agreement, that we can go over the DOE weatherization limit. And then for IJA, we are elevated. It is slowly coming down, but it is something that's being watched on, and we do need to work on bringing that down. That is one of the reasons that we need to reallocate funds, is so that we can get more production in, but also to release the next 50% of our funds. For our health and safety percentages, across the boards, we're at 15%, except for LIHEAP, we do have an exception. You can see that all of our current health and safety percentages for the DOE annual funds, LIHEAP and bill, are well within that amount. The closest we had was for DOE 23, but we're not over what we're allowed to be at. And then for DOE 22, we are working on closing this out. So this one's going to be done shortly. The same with our readiness 22. We did reallocate funds, but we are working on having those funds spent out. And then for the DOE 23 annual funds, we're working on closing that out as well. Since the last month, we did have some that were closed out, and we're still again within our allowable ACPU right now. For our readiness funds, right now we still are waiting for some budget reduction forms. So if you have not submitted a budget reduction form, but you do not have access to the funds because you did not receive an amendment for these funds, we really need those reductions in. This helps us when we're trying to give those agencies that could potentially take on more funds. It allows us to be able to send them to them more efficiently and more quickly. So please, if you have not submitted one, you should have received an email from me in the past, and I've been trying to follow back up with those. But if you don't have access to the funds, but you see a balance remaining, please submit that reduction to me as soon as possible. And then for our DOE 24 annual funds, we're nearing the end. We really have like 2 months left of production, or 2.5 months left, but you can see we are at 35%. So we have a ways to go. I do think with our annual formula funds, we normally do not have issues with spending it. So I think we can have this ramped up, but just be mindful of the approaching deadline. And right now we are within an allowable ACPU level, but again, when more invoices and production are submitted through, that can drastically change, especially within the short amount of time. And with the amount of time we have remaining, it's harder for us to correct the issue. And if we do go over our allowable ACPU limit, they can request for funds to be sent back. So that is something just to be mindful of and remember when you're trying to submit final invoices. And then for our DOE 24 readiness funds, we're still working on, if you can take on additional funds, please let us know. We realize that we likely are going to be returning funds, but as much as possible, we would like to have those spent, and we're trying to give a clearer picture to DOE of how much to anticipate that they may be seeing back from us. And for LIHEAP, we're about 50% the way through. Ideally, we do want to bring that ACPU level down if we can, but we still also have through the end of September for these funds. But invoices would be through at the beginning of September in order for us to close out. And for our IJA, formerly bill balances, we are at about 58.94% of the first 50% that we received. And again, our ACPU level is elevated. And I did email agencies yesterday. If you have questions or concerns, please feel free to reach out, and we can set up meetings to discuss. And then to see where we are as a network, in order to receive the final 50% of the funds, there are certain benchmarks that we have to hit. And one of those, the one that's going to be more focused on from your end, would be the production. So for us to reach the 30% goal that DOE requires, we have to have 1,442 units. Right now, I am sorry, I put a 2 instead of 3 there. I'll have that corrected, but we're at 916 units. So we're at about 19% of that 30% goal. And once we have reached those benchmarks, we'll have some of our additional steps that are currently required in our invoice request, from DHCD to DOE. Some of those restrictions would be taken away because right now there are additional steps we have to meet to make sure that we don't go over our 50% without having met these benchmarks. And then our next meeting is set for April 23rd at 9 a.m. I sent that out yesterday, so if you did not receive an invite or there's someone else that you wanted to attend as well, please reach out to me. And then I'm going to forward it over to Aaron, and I'm sorry I left you with just 5 minutes.
Good morning. Hello, my name is Aaron Shoemaker, and I'm the Housing Program Administrator at DHCD for the Weatherization Deferral Repair Program, WDR for short. Over the course of the next several slides, I will provide an update, evidently a very quick update, on the WDR funding and data on WDR expenditures and remittances. Next slide, please. Previous slide, please. Stay on this slide, please. Thank you. Reminder number 1, the 22, 23, and 24 grant agreements expire June 30, 2025. That's this year. All of these grant agreements have been previously extended. We've been reviewing WDR spending rates, have received a request for funding from subgrantee who needs additional fundings, and we intend to ensure that there is adequate funding statewide to address deferrals. So we will be looking into reallocating funds to subgrantees who need additional WDR to serve their territory. So I will be in touch with each subgrantee with an active 22, 23, and/or 24 grant agreement to discuss the remaining funds. Reminder number 2, the 6-month update of the program manual, which is the February 2025 update, was sent out to the network on the 28th of February and went into effect following Monday. We also released an updated WDR application and form and homeowner agreement, that's the name of one form, with a page 2, the preliminary funding worksheet. Please ensure that all new WDR initial setup reports have this document. Also, thank you to Bill Beachy for noticing that there was an error in the initial release in the instructions of the form. It was in the instructions. We released the patch version March 4th, 2025. We also released on the 28th an updated WDR cover sheet and certification of completion. So please ensure that you're using this updated form on all WDR remittances. And all documents, as is always the case, the latest version is on the WDR webpage of the WDR webpage of the DHCD website. Please, next slide. The next 5 slides, including this one, contain detailed data regarding expenditures by program year of WDR grant agreements based on paid WDR remittances and CAMs. I'm not going to, we don't have time to go over the data in detail. That being said, we will be releasing the slides. I think we usually do it within 1 business day. So if you wish to explore it in more in depth, but the quick point of this slide is that 15 subgrantees initially received a grant agreement, and 17 originally, but 2 dropped out. So the 15 that actually spent money are listed, and less than 1% of the funds that went out in these grant agreements are remaining to be spent by 3 subgrantees. Slide next, please. This slide has the expenditures for the 2022-2023 grant agreement, 23. All current 14 subgrantees originally received the grant agreements, and 3 have remaining funds in 23. 4 subgrantees have blanks because those funds were reallocated and rolled into the 2-year grant agreement for 25-26. And these grant agreements, as the ones on the previous page, are the ones that are expiring June 30, 2025. Please slide next. The slide has expenditures for the 23-24 grant agreement, also expiring June 30, 2025. Originally, 7 subgrantees received the 24 grant agreement, 4 subgrantees spent funds, and 3 grantees have 24 funds remaining in their budget as of the 18th. And yes, slide please next. This slide contains the expenditures for the aforementioned 2-year grant agreement, 2025-2026. These grant agreements contain the remaining WDR funds, and reallocated funds will likely be rolled into these grant agreements rather than creating new ones. 4 subgrantees have begun spending funds from this grant agreement, and currently there is $17.1 million of WDR remaining in the 2-year grant. The grant agreements will expire June 30, 2026. Next, please, slide. This slide contains the data based on paid remittances for WDR CAMs. As of this month, the network has served over 2,000 homes in Virginia with WDR specifically. So over 1,100 single-family homes and 865 multifamily units have received WDR and ostensibly been weatherized. The average remittance for single-family homes increased in 2024 to about $21,500, and it's remaining at that currently for the current year. The average dollar figures on this table, the one on the right, top right, include the dollar figure has both housing repairs, which is the materials and labor, and the administrative cost attached to the respective remittance. One day we do hope to have parsed out data that has housing repairs separated from admin. But until that day, this is the numbers that we're working with. And then finally, the bottom chart shows the repair types associated with these jobs that have been paid. Most jobs have multiple repair types, and over 60% of the jobs have HVAC repairs, and over 50% have roof repairs. And then you can look at the chart for the other percentages. And it's also worth noting that about a quarter of the jobs have repairs that have fallen into the other category. Very interesting. This concludes the WDR program update. Thank you for listening. And again, I will be in touch with sub-grantees regarding the expiration of the 22, 23, and 24 grant agreements and potential reallocation of funds. Goodbye.
Yes, thank you everyone that joined. We really do appreciate your time and for you sticking on a little bit longer for us to go through the rest of the PowerPoint. I know that many of us may have somewhere we have to jump off to, but if you have any questions that you wanted to ask before we get off, please feel free to. I am going to probably stop recording the meeting now.
Michelle, I just wanted to say thank you for taking some of the feedback